Okay, hello everybody. I hope you all had wonderful holidays as they continue on. We've got New Year's tomorrow. And so yeah, I'll be doing the evolution of 911 systems and core features. And first I'll talk about myself a little bit. My name is Tracie Neufeld. I live in Red Deer, Alberta. So if anybody else was in Alberta, they know it was a nasty cold Christmas. And but yesterday the weather warmed up. It was beautiful. So I've worked for Red Deer Emergency Services for my whole career in my 911 career. I had 10 years first as a call taker, dispatcher, and then a supervisor in the room. And during that time, I was doing a lot of training off the side of my desk. When we would have new recruits and stuff like that, they would pull me off the floor. And then about 4 years ago, the full-time position opened up and I was successful in getting the position, and it was really cool and exciting. So since that time, I've been able to work. I have an office, a normal 9-to-5 job, and it's been really, really great. I really enjoy the position. I also do the QA in the center and then our accreditation as well. Over the last couple of years, as we've been transitioning, getting ready for next gen, I was able to help implement the new call handling solution, and then we also upgraded our CAD. We've been about live a year with that, and that was a huge, huge project that we did. So welcome. And I'm just going to go over some of the studying tips that I kind of put together as you're studying for your ENP. It was a very hard exam. So I know you've probably heard that. Don't be scared by that. I think if you're prepared, you'll do fine. But just know that it does take a lot of time and dedication. I spend many, many evenings sitting at home, and going over the books and reviewing stuff. It did take a significant amount of time commitment, but it was well worth it. It was very, very rewarding to have that exam completed and to get a little email pop through that said, hey, you were successful. And I found that even though the day-to-day job that I do, it didn't change that for me, but I found that I was able to hold my own in all aspects of the jobs and conversations more. I understood more when I was talking with radio vendors about terminology they would use and everything like that. I found it made me a very much more rounded person in the industry. And that was one of the takeaways that I got from it. So lessons that I learned while I was studying, take every resource, all the help you can get. Every single practice exam that I could find, study cards, everything I could find, other study groups, videos to watch, I would watch them because I found different people would focus on different things, and they may be worded in a way that I could understand. I would suggest that you make your own charts and diagrams of the concepts, and I used Canva to do them, and as I was studying, I would add more pieces and gather through them. I've thrown a couple of them into the slideshow so you can see, and I found that creating them on my own really helped me understand the network of everything. Understand whole concepts, not just the terms. So yes, you do need to understand the terms and the acronyms and stuff like that, but understand how they work together and how this will affect this. And I found that really, really helped me as well, because the exam is not, what does this word means? It's more like, if this fails, it will impact this. And understanding the whole concept really helped with eliminating those answers that weren't incorrect. Do all the practice exams you can find. I would go through them. Then I would go through, find the answers, and then those were the areas of the chapters that I would focus on, the areas in the exams. So I did it first off the get-go, and my score was not very good. I think it was like 60%, and I was like, okay, I need to study in order to pass this exam, and it really helped me figure out where to study. Study more than you think you will need to, And then also too, when you get to the exam, read all the instructions, take the time. They give you lots of time to do it. So read through it, because one thing that I discovered is that it allowed you to cross off the ones that you knew were automatically wrong, and just visually eliminating two of the other answers and then deciding between the two really helped. It also showed you how you could skip and go back to different questions, and I found that very useful. I chose to do the exam in an exam center for the main reason that I didn't want the stress of having to set up my environment in a way that the exam proctor would be happy with. And I've also heard of people failing for reasons that were out of their control, like people walking in the room or things like that. And I just didn't want to have that stress. I found it much easier just to go somewhere where they were set up and do the exam that way. But of course, that's your own decision and how much accessibility you have to those areas. Okay, so today, the sections that we're going to cover is so basic 911, then basic 911 with Annie Alley, enhanced 911, and then we're going into enhanced 911 for wireless. Then we'll touch a bit on the VoIP and VoIP Canada. Obviously, now we're getting into next gen, and that will be touched on another topic, another session later on. So in studying for this and preparing this, I found this quote, and I thought it was very reflective of what we're going to talk about. It's always good to remember where you come from and to celebrate it, to remember where you come from as part of where you're going. And right now, as our industry is transitioning into next gen, it was very cool to go and look at the old systems and see the history of how we got to this point today. So let's talk about basic 911. I did put the numbers there of the chapters. So this is 2.6.1. If you're looking back at the slides later on, and you can refer back to your book, or if you want to follow along right now, you can as well. So in 1957, the National Association of Fire Chiefs, they wanted a nationwide number for people to report fires. They realized that people traveling to different areas had to remember different numbers. They maybe weren't always easily accessible. And they thought, we need to have one number that can report emergencies. And they proposed it in 1958. Now, it wasn't until 11 years later that the first 911 call was made in 1968. If you're wanting to remember those numbers, 68 minus 11 is 57. So I thought those numbers worked well together. First one was in Haleyville, Alabama. And they were the first municipality to use 911. And it's a very small town. Right now, they only have 4,500 people, but they have a 911 holiday every year, a big fair that they do, which I thought was kind of cool. But let's not forget Canada in this. We actually had a national number before Haleyville did. And that was in 1959. So that was actually quite a few years before. It's unfortunate that it was 999 and not 911, because I think that's why they can still use that 911 claim to fame, because it was Canada, we got there first, which I think is wonderful. It came about because Mayor Jason Juba went to the UK, and the UK had already had their 999. And he was like, this is a wonderful idea. Let's implement it. And in it, when they went live, it replaced 32 separate service numbers. That in itself just shows me the impact of having one number and how important it is, and not having all these different numbers. In 1975, then they switched over to 911 as well. But I thought that was really cool. So in doing some of the research of this, I went in and did a deep dive on Red Deer specifically, and when the different pieces of the timeline fit into the history of my center. And I found it very interesting that there was actually opposition to implementing 911. Some of it was cost prohibitive. They had to upgrade the equipment. There was maybe going to be delays by going through a switchboard operator, the cost of additional staff, because you think about that, if a fire hall is only answering fire calls, then all of a sudden to get all emergencies, it would create a need for additional staff. And in this article that was written by our fire chief at the time, he said that everybody was busy enough already. And I found that interesting that in our world, we can't imagine a world without 911 and how it wasn't immediately embraced by everybody. Why was 911 chosen? Well, it was short, easy to remember, and it had never been designated for an office code, area code, or a service code. So it's one of the reasons why 911 was chosen. So this is one of my diagrams that I put together, and in it, it shows basic 911. So we have our phone going on a copper line to the end office or to the central office directly, however it was set up. And then from that central office, it was a one-way directly into the PSAP. That's a picture of our PSAP center now. Obviously, that wasn't the building that was used at the time when we had our first 911 call. But it was one way, and it was directed from that central office into one PSAP center. And that's the important part to remember with basic 911. It was just one way. If you landed at this central office, you went to this PSAP center. The next slide just shows pictures from that 911 call in Haleyville, how there was the mayor who dialed 911, one-way direct trunk line into their central office, and that is actually their central office, and then one-way directly into the police station where they were answering 911 calls at that time. So obviously there was limitations to a basic 911 system. The biggest one being no address, no phone number, right? You had to get the phone number verified, get the address verified. It was voice calls only. So there was no solution for deaf, hard of hearing, anything like that. And calls were routed based on the originating telephone exchange, not on the caller's physical location. So the municipal boundaries are not necessarily the same of emergency boundaries. So, and it was also very, very vulnerable to single points of failure. So now we have basic 911 with Annie Alley. So if anybody has done the on-scene first training with Tracie Elridge, I will completely give her the credit for this little picture here. I loved the way that she used little Annie and big Al to demonstrate Annie Alley. How the Annie is a smaller package with just the phone number, and then Al is a bigger package that includes the phone number and the address. I loved the way that she used that illustration. So if you see, Annie just has the phone numbers, and then Al has the map on him that shows the address as well. So one thing important to remember is that this was the first major advancement with 911 services. And what service provider started using CAMA, which I'll explain in the next slide, to deliver the caller's phone number as well. And then eventually they use that same technology to send the alley. And this is I can't imagine being a 911 operator, not getting any information, and then all of a sudden getting that phone number and just being able to call back those callers that hang up. And I had read that it took about, originally, if they were tracing phone numbers, it took about 4 hours during office hours to do that. So you can only imagine the stress on the telecommunicator when they weren't able to trace down those phone numbers. Important to remember that basic 911 with Annie Alley is not enhanced 911. It is the calls are still directed only to one PSAP, but they are able to collect that NENA information. So what CAMA was, is it was ticker tape attached to, you can see them attached to those machines there, and it was used originally for billing. And when phone numbers would call out, they would generate this ticker tape, and it would say how long, where the long distance call was made, and that kind of stuff. And it retrieved that data. Because it was already retrieving the phone numbers, that technology was able to be used to send that phone number to the PSAP. Now, if you're trying to remember what CAMA sends the ANI, so in Spanish, cama is bed. So I kind of just threw in this illustration showing that the CAMA was first used to send the ANI. So hopefully that helps if some people are visual like that and like throwing pictures together to remember key concepts. So yeah, how did it apply? It already collected the ANI information. It worked really, really great for 7-digit phone numbers. Now, as 10-digit numbers became required, a new solution was needed on top of that. And that is right as things started transitioning into enhanced 911. So it's very, very important to remember that what separates basic 911 from an enhanced 911 is the selective router. So I have another illustration for that. So here we have our basic girl, and she doesn't, and then the girl with the sash of the selective router is the enhanced one. So she got her selective router queen. So it's important to remember, that's the biggest thing to remember with that. It's not the sending of the NENA, it's the selective router that makes it. So selective routing is the process by which 911 calls are routed to a specific PSAP based upon the street address of the caller. So it doesn't understand addresses, but they understand numbers. The selective routing does. And that is how the street addresses are converted into the ESN, so emergency service number. And then the selective number will read that number and then send the call to the appropriate PSAP sender. So 3 major things are needed in order to have selected enhanced 911. And so we need the MSAG. The MSAG is the Master Street Address Guide. So what it is every single street, every single address range in that community. And that ensures that the addresses will match the emergency service number. And it also prevents invalid addresses from entering into the database. Next, we have the emergency service number. So it's a number up to 5 digits. I've noticed in our area, it's mostly 3 digits that I see assigned. And what it is it's the specific combination of police, fire, and EMS services that represent that zone that they're in, and that they are represented by each of those. And then you need your selective routing database. So that is a database that has all of the emergency service numbers and says, if this is your emergency service number, this is the PSAP that you need to go to. The 3 of those things combined will give you enhanced 911. So again, the Master Street Address Guide, it's a list of all the addresses in a 911 service area. So the addresses and streets are assigned selective routing codes. They're called emergency service numbers, and they will enable the proper routing of 911 calls. So all the zones are assigned a number. So I was trying to think of a good way to illustrate, like, how do you get assigned your number, your zone and your number? And all I could think of was like, you get a number, you get a number. So Oprah had to come play today. So once the emergency service numbers have been created and assigned to the telephone numbers, the data is uploaded to the selective router database. And so once you get the number, the database will look up the number, and it will select the proper PSAP to send the call to. A couple key terms that we'll discuss that have to do with that is alternate routing. So if there's a failure in the address guide or with the numbers assigned, then there will be a pre-programmed routing that will happen that will send them to a PSAP that has been predetermined if there's a failure in any of those systems. So that's what alternative routing is. I found a really interesting article. 1991 is when Red Deer upgraded into that enhanced, enhanced 911. So I thought that was kind of interesting to give a timeline on when this actually did happen, which isn't that long ago, really. Selective transfer is pre-programmed keys that have the appropriate police, fire, or EMS. It will send it to that based on the emergency service number. So in our center, we have 3 keys that say police, fire, and ambulance. And depending on what the emergency service zone is that call is originating from, they will be dynamic and they will change and we'll send them to different PSAP centers. We have a huge response area of over 70 fire departments that we dispatch for, and we're the primary PSAP for all of them. So we interact with many, many other PSAP centers every day, and it's really nice having those dynamic keys that will change depending on what area we need to send that call to, if it's a different police service or an EMS service. A fixed transfer is different in that the numbers are specifically programmed in and they don't dynamically change based on what the emergency service zone is. So that's the difference between the selective transfer and then the fixed transfer. Okay, enhanced 911 for wireless. This is going to be touched on in another session. I just have a couple things that we'll go over quickly, and then we'll let the other presenter go in deeper into what the enhanced 911 for wireless is. But I did find a couple interesting tidbits here. So what happened is, everything was going great. We had Annie Alley displaying, we had selective routing, we're getting mostly to the right PSAP center. Then cell phones create huge problems because the technology wasn't able to route them properly. It wasn't providing Annie Alley information. And obviously technology had beat us, had gone ahead of where the 911 industry's technology was. I thought this was interesting too. In the news article, it said that there could be a day where it's common for 46% of all calls to come from cell phones. And we know that that number is way higher now. Last year, we were at about 82% cell phone calls. So it's interesting how predictions can happen, but then the real data does change. So wireless phase 1, it provided the phone number, so the Annie, and the tower sector. But of course, that tower sector could be a big area. It didn't actually provide the actual location of the cell phone. And I have found in the years that I'm working that dispatchers that worked when wireless phase 1 was there, they have a really hard time trusting the GPS ping of wireless phase 2 because I think it was so unpredictable and unreliable in wireless phase 1 that even to this day, sometimes they don't trust the wireless phase 2. And new dispatchers are much more comfortable doing that. Then wireless phase 2 shows the approximate location of the caller based on cell tower triangulation. So it was much better. It wasn't the tower sector, it would actually triangulate where the caller was and pinpoint them in. This is my drawing that I had added more and more pieces in as I learned, and it shows the landline on the left-hand side and how it came in to the office with a selective router, and then on the right-hand side, how cell phones would gather in. And they were using not the central office, but the mobile switching center would still go into the office with the selective route into the selective router, and then the PSAP, it was sent to the appropriate PSAP after that. Okay. In the exam, it does talk about US overview for VoIP as well. So we are going to touch on that in case there are questions on the exam. So VSP stands for VoIP service providers. Now, their customers in the States, they have to register their addresses with their VoIP service provider. So whenever they move, they have to move and re-register their VoIP. There is definitely news stories of people calling from the wrong state and they're getting sent to a different, right? Their VoIP is still sending them to the PSAP center of where they originally had lived. So it's super important that they do that. So because VoIPs can be nomadic, the user is required to re-register the location of their phone once they are moved. So how it works is the caller places a 911 call. The VoIP service provider assigns an ESQK to the call, and that is an emergency services query key. And what that does is that will route it to the correct selective router. So the PSAP will receive that key and then will query the alley to retrieve the caller's registered location and the caller back. So if they're registered in the right location, the VoIP call will go to the correct PSAP. In Canada, it's very different because if it's a fixed VoIP service, they're treated like a E911 with full anti-alley and selective router. But Canada does not allow anybody that has a VoIP phone to enter in that address information themselves. So any VoIP call VoIP phone that can be nomadic, which I don't have the data on how much it would be, but my assumption would be most of them, because that's the convenience of having a VoIP and it's a computer and you can move a computer anywhere. They have to be transferred to a third-party call center for verbal confirmation of the location of the caller. Here in Canada, that's Northern 911. We've received tons of phone calls from them every day where they confirm the phone number and address and send it to a PSAP center. I think they do an excellent job because we definitely, when they ask us if we dispatch for that area, 9 times out of 10, we definitely do. So like in the US, user inputted location is not allowed in Canada. So here's a couple of the CRTC. They regulate that 911 contribution, the service industry for us. So they made a decision in 2005 that required nomadic VoIP 911 service delivery. And they were the ones that go through all of the decisions for us and our industry. So remember that I think I did have a question on it about CRTC and who is our regulatory compliance and who governs that. So yeah. And I went through that very quick. We've got 15 more minutes. So I guess if anybody has any questions, I hope that was helpful and useful to everybody in going through it. I would highly recommend that if you have any of the data on your own center and when the different technology pieces came through, it was really, really interesting seeing that and how it went. So if you have any questions, I added my email address there. You're welcome to reach out, and I'm happy to share any of the resources that I've gathered as well.
Thanks, Tracie. Does anybody have any questions right now? Kate, is that you?
That's me. Tracie, super awesome job. Thank you so much. One quick, yeah, I love the graphics. One quick thing. Northern 911 is probably the largest, I think, maybe, but not the only VoIP services.
Okay.
There are other ones. I think it's the one that most of us know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I intimately know that. So
yeah, exactly. You would be the expert on that, but that's good to know too. I think that's the only one that I've dealt with, so that's good to know.
Any other questions? Again, you can reach out to Tracie at any time, and I see she's included our executive email address for NENA Ontario. So thank you for doing that. Oh, I'm not sure who that is, but go ahead. If you've got your hand up, you can go ahead.
Sorry, working on my unmute here. My apologies. It's Frank here from Stratford Police. Just a quick question regarding when you say VoIP, that generally refers to the SIP lines?
Well, I think it's you might have to help me with this one, but like SIP lines are internet lines, but like that's not necessarily a VoIP customer for calling into 911, because like we would have SIP lines coming in that would have like that would also be involved with the call handling solution that would be computer based. So with VoIP, it's, I don't know, can anybody explain that a little bit different than me? Because I feel like VoIP lines could be SIP lines, but it's not necessarily all SIP lines are VoIP lines, correct?
No, I hear what you're saying. No, I think I understand that. Yeah. Thanks.
We can get you a solid answer on that, Frank.
Thank you.
Well, I can follow up as well. I think I got what you're saying. I mean, I know the difference between the two, so I just wanted to verify, because we tried to get SIP lines going, and we ran into that where we always got that northern answering service, asking us for a phone number. So.
Oh, like in your center, you went to SIP lines. We actually had that too. Like the city changed all of our desk phones over into like it was some sort of SIP line. So yeah, now if we call 911 from inside the PSAP center, it goes to Northern 911, which was a different change for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a piece missing, because in other centers where SIP lines are implemented, they don't get that intermediate answering center. It goes directly to jurisdiction. So there's a piece missing, which I'm not sure what it is, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, what I was told is because they're all through our laptops now, they're nomadic and they're not fixed VoIP lines. And for that reason, they had to go through Northern 911 for us, because they are nomadic, and in Canada, they have to go through that third-party app. So in Red Deer, at least, there was no way to get it to go and be a fixed VoIP.
Initially, when I did the call, it went to another center before it went to Northern as well. So
that would be the other ones that are contracted. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Anyway, sorry. Thank you for answering the question.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so if we don't have any other questions at this time, thank you again, Tracie,
Welcome.
for both Kate and myself and our NENA team. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this, as well as all of our presenters. We have our next session. Actually, I'm just going to look that up right now. I believe it's scheduled for next. I don't have it with me right now, but I believe we do have one scheduled next week, right, Kate?
Yes, I'm going to send out all of the invites over the next couple of days for the next sessions in 2026.
Okay, so we will see you all next week. Have a great New Year, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Tracie.
Thanks, Tracie.
Thank you, everyone.